In November 2023, Changpeng Zhao, the world's most powerful crypto CEO, walked into a US courtroom and pleaded guilty to crimes that could have earned him decades in prison. The fine he paid was the largest ever imposed on a single individual in financial history, $4.3 billion. But what he built and how he hid it from regulators across 3 continents for nearly 6 years is far more insane than the headlines revealed. This is the story of Binance, the crypto exchange that processed more transactions than every other platform combined. An empire built on secrecy, speed, and a complete disregard for the rules everyone else had to follow. From backroom deals with shadow banks to coded messages about evading law enforcement, the internal documents tell a story of calculated deception on a scale that makes traditional money laundering look primitive. And the most disturbing part? The systems CZ created are still operating, the money is still moving, and buried in court filings is evidence of a backup plan almost nobody is talking about. This isn't just a story about cryptocurrency. It's about power, about what happens when one person controls the financial gateway for millions of people and decides the law doesn't apply to him. Because while regulators were chasing Binance in one country, CZ was already building secret banking relationships in 3 others. And what those relationships enabled is something the crypto world still hasn't fully reckoned with. So how did a man who couldn't even get a bank account in 2017 end up controlling an empire worth over $90 billion just 4 years later? And what did he know about the criminal activity flowing through his platform that prosecutors are still uncovering? The answer starts long before Binance existed. It starts with a man who understood something fundamental about money that most people never figure out. That the real profit isn't in holding it, it's in moving it. And if you control the place where it moves, you control everything. Here's what we're going to cover. How CZ built a ghost company that existed in no country, the shadow banking network that moved billions past regulators, the internal messages that proved deliberate deception, and the escape plan buried in court documents that prosecutors missed. Stay until the end, because what CZ is building next could make Binance look like a trial run. Changpeng Zhao was born in Jiangsu, China in 1977. His father was a university professor, but during the Cultural Revolution, the family was labeled as intellectuals, which meant they were targeted. His father was sent to re-education camps. Eventually, the family fled to Vancouver, Canada when CZ was 12 years old. They had almost nothing. CZ has talked about how his parents worked multiple jobs just to keep the family fed. He worked at McDonald's, pumped gas at night, did whatever it took. But CZ was obsessed with 2 things: making money and computers. He studied computer science at McGill University in Montreal, and after graduating, he bounced between tech jobs. He worked at the Tokyo Stock Exchange building trading systems, then moved to Bloomberg, where he spent years developing software for futures traders. This is crucial, because CZ wasn't just learning to code, he was learning how high-frequency trading worked, how exchanges operated, how money moved between countries with minimal friction. By 2013, CZ had left Bloomberg and was playing poker in Shanghai to pass the time. That's when a friend told him about Bitcoin. CZ became obsessed immediately. He saw what most people didn't see yet. That cryptocurrency wasn't just digital money. It was a way to move value across borders instantly, with no banks, no governments, no permissions needed. And more importantly, whoever built the infrastructure for that movement would become unimaginably wealthy. So CZ sold his apartment, put everything into Bitcoin, and went all in. But CZ didn't want to just hold Bitcoin and hope it went up. He wanted to build the casino. He wanted to be the house, because the house always wins. In 2014, he joined a crypto exchange called OKCoin as head of technology, but within a year, he'd left after disputes with the founder. That's when CZ decided to build his own exchange, something faster, cheaper, and more aggressive than anything that existed. He called it Binance, a combination of binary and finance. But CZ had a problem. By 2017, China had banned cryptocurrency exchanges entirely. So CZ did something brilliant and borderline insane. He decided Binance wouldn't be based anywhere. No headquarters, no official address. The company would be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. A ghost ship floating in international waters, untouchable by any single government. But building a stateless company was just the first step, because what CZ needed next was something far more difficult to acquire and far more dangerous to maintain. He needed banks willing to break the rules alongside him. In July 2017, Binance launched, and CZ did something that would become his signature move. He didn't wait for permission, didn't apply for licenses, didn't hire compliance lawyers. He just opened the doors and started accepting users from every country on Earth. No questions asked, no identity checks, nothing. The growth was explosive. Within 6 months, Binance became the largest crypto exchange in the world by volume. People loved it because it was fast, the fees were low, and you could trade hundreds of different coins that other exchanges wouldn't list. But there was another reason Binance grew so fast. It let people move money in ways that weren't possible anywhere else, and that attracted a very specific type of customer. Internal Binance compliance reports, which later leaked, showed the company was processing billions of dollars in transactions flagged as potentially linked to ransomware groups, terrorist financing, and sanctions evasion. In one case, Binance processed over $200 million tied to a single Iranian sanctions evasion network. In another, the platform was used to move funds for Hamas. Binance's own systems flagged these transactions, but they were processed anyway. And this is where it gets truly disturbing. Because while regulators in the United States, Europe, and Asia were all trying to figure out where Binance was even located so they could investigate it, CZ was already building secret banking relationships in 3 other countries. Stay with me, because the system he created is something prosecutors are still unraveling. CZ understood something that most tech founders don't understand until it's too late. The bottleneck in crypto isn't the technology, it's the banks. Because at some point, people need to convert their Bitcoin into dollars or euros or yen. And that requires a bank. But banks are regulated. They have to verify identities, report suspicious transactions, follow the law. So if you're running an exchange that doesn't want to follow those rules, you need shadow banks, institutions willing to look the other way. Binance formed partnerships with a payment processor called Banxa and several smaller banks in countries with looser oversight, the Bahamas, Malta, the Seychelles. These weren't mistakes, they were strategic choices. CZ set up shell companies in each location with local executives who could sign documents and deal with regulators if needed. But the real control stayed with CZ, who was constantly moving between countries, never staying anywhere long enough to establish residency. This structure gave Binance plausible deniability. If regulators in the US demanded records, Binance could say they were based in Malta. If European authorities came knocking, suddenly the operation was run out of the Seychelles. And if things got too hot in one jurisdiction, CZ would just shut down operations there and move everything somewhere else. Former employees described the company culture as chaotic and paranoid. People used encrypted messaging apps that deleted conversations automatically. Executives were told not to put anything in writing that could be subpoenaed. And CZ himself communicated almost exclusively through Telegram, often deleting messages immediately after they were read. But despite the secrecy, Binance was printing money. By 2021, the exchange was doing over $2 trillion in monthly trading volume. The profit margins were insane because crypto exchanges basically just match buyers and sellers and take a cut of every transaction. Binance was reportedly making over $1 billion in profit per month at its peak, and almost all of that money went straight to CZ. He became a celebrity in the crypto world, posted constantly on Twitter, now X, gave interviews talking about financial freedom and decentralization. He was playing the part of the visionary founder. But behind the scenes, U.S. federal prosecutors were building a case. The investigation started with FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is part of the U.S. Treasury. They'd been tracking suspicious transactions flowing through Binance for years. Then, the Department of Justice got involved. They started subpoenaing records from the shadow banks Binance had been using. And what they found was damning. Internal Binance communications showed executives joking about U.S. money laundering laws. In one message, a senior executive said American regulations were a pain, but it didn't matter because Binance's strategy was to route U.S. customers through offshore entities where enforcement was weak. In another, CZ himself wrote that Binance should publicly claim they were blocking U.S. users while privately allowing them access through VPNs. This wasn't ignorance. This was deliberate. Binance knew exactly what they were doing, and they did it anyway because the money was too good. By 2022, regulators around the world were closing in. The UK banned Binance from operating. Japan issued warnings. The SEC in the United States filed charges alleging Binance had been illegally operating as an unregistered exchange. The CFTC filed separate charges for evading derivatives regulations. It was starting to look like the walls were finally closing in on CZ. But what almost nobody saw coming was this. CZ didn't run. He didn't try to disappear into some non-extradition country with his billions. Instead, he did something that shocked even former Binance executives. He started negotiating. And what happened next would trigger the largest financial penalty ever imposed on a single individual. But the plea deal itself is only half the story, because what CZ negotiated to keep and what prosecutors agreed to leave untouched reveals something far more troubling about how this actually ends. But first, you need to understand the one decision that made it all unravel. Because in 2023, CZ made a calculation. He looked at the evidence prosecutors had, he looked at the potential prison time, and he decided the best move wasn't to fight. It was to settle, pay the fine, take the plea deal, and walk away. In November 2023, CZ appeared in a Seattle federal courthouse. He pleaded guilty to violating the Bank Secrecy Act by failing to maintain an adequate anti-money laundering program. The deal he struck was extraordinary. Binance would pay $4.3 billion in fines and penalties. CZ would personally step down as CEO, and he would pay a separate $5 million fine and face up to 18 months in prison. For context, $4.3 billion is more than most countries' entire annual budgets. It's the largest corporate penalty ever imposed in a criminal crypto case. But here's the twist. Even after paying that fine, CZ is still one of the richest people on the planet. His net worth is estimated at over $30 billion, which means the fine, as massive as it was, only took a fraction of what he made. And the prison sentence? CZ ended up serving just 4 months. He was released in late September 2024. 4 months for overseeing a platform that prosecutors said processed billions of dollars in illicit funds. Some people called it a slap on the wrist. Others said it was the cost of doing business. But what almost nobody is talking about is this. CZ is scheduled for full release soon. He still controls billions, and buried in court documents is evidence of a backup plan that could change everything. What prosecutors missed tells you everything about what comes next. During the investigation, federal authorities seized massive amounts of internal Binance data, emails, messages, transaction records. But because the company had been so decentralized and secretive, prosecutors openly admitted they probably didn't get everything. There were offshore servers they couldn't access, encrypted communications they couldn't crack, shell companies in jurisdictions that wouldn't cooperate, and CZ's plea deal was surprisingly narrow. He admitted to one charge, failed to implement proper anti-money laundering controls, but he was never charged with personally profiting from criminal activity, never charged with fraud, never forced to give up his ownership stake in Binance. He stepped down as CEO, but he still owns the company, and Binance is still operating. In fact, despite everything, Binance is still the largest crypto exchange in the world. After CZ stepped down, the new CEO, Richard Teng, publicly committed to full regulatory compliance. Binance hired dozens of compliance officers, started working with regulators, got licensed in several countries. The company is trying to rebrand as legitimate. But the structure CZ built, the systems that allowed billions in illicit funds to move undetected, those didn't just disappear. Court documents show Binance processed over $10 billion in transactions for customers in sanctioned countries like Iran, even after claiming they'd blocked those regions. The infrastructure is still there. The offshore entities, the shadow banking relationships, they've just gotten better at hiding it. And CZ himself? He's been spotted in Dubai, which conveniently has no extradition treaty with the United States. He's posted on social media about new projects he's exploring: artificial intelligence, biotech, education platforms. He's talking like a man who's already moved on. Some former Binance insiders believe CZ has been quietly moving assets into offshore trusts and decentralized finance protocols that are nearly impossible to trace. If true, it would mean even if regulators came after him again, they'd have a hard time finding the money. It's the ultimate escape hatch, and it's completely legal in many jurisdictions. But there's a bigger question here. What does the Binance story tell us about the future of money? Because love it or hate it, CZ proved something important. He proved that in the digital age, it's possible to build a financial empire that exists outside the traditional system. No central bank approval, no government permission, just code and customers and the willingness to move faster than regulators can react. That's terrifying to some people, liberating to others, but either way, it's real, and it's not going away. Binance wasn't the first crypto exchange to bend the rules, and it won't be the last. There are already new platforms launching in countries with even weaker oversight, places where $4 billion fines don't exist because there's no one to enforce them. The regulatory game of whack-a-mole continues. Shut down one exchange and 3 more pop up. Ban crypto in one country, and it migrates to another. It's a fundamental mismatch. Regulators operate within borders. Crypto operates everywhere at once. And CZ understood that better than almost anyone. He built Binance to be borderless from day one, which made it incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous. Because when money can move anywhere, instantly, with no oversight, it's not just libertarians and tech entrepreneurs who benefit. It's also criminals, terrorists, sanction evaders, everyone who wants to move money outside the system. That's the uncomfortable truth the crypto industry doesn't like to talk about. The same features that make cryptocurrency revolutionary, permissionless, decentralized, borderless, also make it perfect for illicit activity. And exchanges like Binance that prioritize growth over compliance become the on-ramps for that activity. Binance processed an estimated $11 billion in transactions tied to illegal activity between 2017 and 2023. That's not an accusation. That's what federal prosecutors documented: ransomware payments, dark web marketplaces, sanctions evasion, money laundering. It all flowed through Binance. and the company's own compliance team flagged much of it in real time. But leadership chose to keep processing the transactions anyway. Why? Because stopping them would have meant losing customers and losing revenue. And in the hyper-competitive world of crypto exchanges, where users can switch platforms in seconds, Binance's strategy was to be the fastest and the cheapest, not the most compliant. And for a long time, it worked. But the Binance story also reveals something else: the staggering amount of power one person can accumulate in a very short time when they control a financial platform. At its peak, CZ controlled more transaction volume than most traditional banks. He had more influence over crypto markets than almost anyone else on Earth. A single tweet from CZ could move prices. A decision to list or delist a coin could make or break projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And he wielded that power from the shadows. No board of directors to answer to. No shareholders demanding transparency. No regulators breathing down his neck. Just CZ, his inner circle, and a network of shell companies designed to keep authorities guessing. It's easy to see why that made regulators nervous, and it's easy to see why it made CZ a hero to the crypto faithful. He was the guy who refused to bow to the old system, who built something so fast and so decentralized that governments couldn't keep up. In their eyes, CZ wasn't a criminal, he was a revolutionary. But revolutions have consequences, and the consequence of Binance's rise is that trust in crypto exchanges is more fragile than ever. Every few months, another exchange collapses. FTX imploded after its founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, was caught using customer funds to cover losses at his trading firm. He's now serving 25 years in prison. Celsius, Voyager, BlockFi, all collapsed, wiping out billions in customer deposits. And Binance? It survived. Not because it was more honest, but because it was bigger, because it moved faster, and because CZ was willing to pay the fine and walk away before the whole thing burned down. Now consider this. CZ is 47 years old. He's worth over $30 billion. He served 4 months in prison, and he's free. The infrastructure he built is still operational, the money is still moving, and there's no indication he's done. In fact, some crypto insiders believe CZ's next move will be even bigger, that he's using his fortune to fund the next generation of decentralized finance platforms. Systems that don't even need a company behind them, just code running on blockchains that no government can shut down. If he succeeds, it won't matter how many times regulators come after him. Because there won't be anything left to regulate. That's the endgame for true decentralization. A financial system that operates entirely peer-to-peer, with no intermediaries, no central points of failure, and no off switch. It's what Bitcoin was supposed to be. But Bitcoin alone isn't enough. You need exchanges, you need liquidity, you need infrastructure. And people like CZ have spent the last decade building that infrastructure, whether regulators like it or not. So where does that leave us? Binance is still operating, CZ is still wealthy, and the crypto industry is more influential than ever. Governments are scrambling to figure out how to regulate it without crushing innovation. Traditional banks are launching their own crypto services, and millions of people around the world are using cryptocurrency every day for better or worse. The Binance story isn't over, it's just entering a new chapter. Because the systems CZ built, the relationships he formed, the strategies he pioneered, they didn't disappear when he pleaded guilty. They evolved. They went deeper underground. They got more sophisticated. And the uncomfortable truth is that for every Binance that gets caught, there are 10 more platforms doing the exact same thing, just more carefully. Learning from CZ's mistakes, building even more decentralized structures, using even more layers of shell companies and offshore banks. The game hasn't changed. The players have just gotten smarter. So, what's the lesson here? Maybe it's that, in the modern financial system, the line between innovation and crime is thinner than we'd like to admit. That the same tools that empower individuals can also enable the worst kinds of actors, and that the people who win are the ones willing to operate in that gray zone longer than everyone else. CZ operated in that zone for 6 years. He built an empire, he changed an industry, and when the bill finally came due, he paid it and walked away. $4.3 billion, 4 months in prison, and he's still one of the most powerful people in crypto. That's not a cautionary tale, that's a blueprint. Watch what CZ announces from Dubai over the next 18 months. If it's a decentralized protocol with no company behind it, no CEO to arrest, and no servers to seize, then everything you just heard wasn't the ending of this story. It was the prologue.